Dave Birkett of the Detroit Free Press here, along with Carlos Monarrez. Coming in after you adjust the camera, Carlos. Take your seat. Come on. All right, look, Game 4 of the preseason.
Oh, it's an exciting day.
Super exciting day. It's actually
in Cleveland. You get to go to exotic Cleveland. It's so unfair.
Bad city. Come on, it's good, man. I got some buddies there. It's always good to catch up. Right, dog? I'm looking at you. Hopefully we'll catch up Thursday.
Name dropper.
Yeah, right. So look, preseason game number 4. Obviously, the performance this week will factor into the Lions roster decisions. A couple of they really only have a few spots at the back of the roster. My projected 53-man roster, the one and only, should drop sometime today. It's already filed, so I'm going to hold back some of the surprise, some of the suspense, to make sure you guys click on that story. But let's start, Carlos. Couple bubble guys I think we should talk about, or bubble positions, really. Quarterback. The Lions made a move this week. They added Luis Perez, former AAF quarterback, got rid of David Fales. I don't think anyone expected Fales to make the roster. Perez is probably this team's practice squad quarterback. Josh Johnson, Tom Savage. Who's Matthew Stafford's backup during the season?
I get the feeling that they want it to be Savage. They've had a longer look at him. He has more of a, I don't know if you history, I guess, I don't know. Johnson's been around for a while, but
more of a history with Sean Ryan, at least.
With Sean Ryan, and I think he's been a starter longer for more games. They probably feel more comfortable with him. I think Josh Johnson played well, pretty well in the last game, moved the offense. I like to see him get more time. He only got, I think, 2 series last game, so I like to see him get more of an opportunity. They probably want to take a look at Savage, but I think it'd be Savage, but that's close. What do you think?
No, I'm with you. I mean, look, Savage has only played 12 snaps because he got hurt in the first quarter of the first preseason game, and then didn't play the last 2 weeks. So while I think Savage is the guy, and I gave him the edge on my roster prediction, I think that's still one that's a little bit up for debate there. I mean, Josh Johnson, well-traveled. He has a little bit of a history with Sean Ryan, too. Has done a good job since he came in. Not lighting things on fire, obviously, but, you sign and you play a couple days later, and really he's been here 2 weeks. I think there's something to be said about that. So, not a great backup quarterback situation, as we've talked about all along. I would give Tom Savage the edge as long as he plays well enough and stays healthy this week against the Browns.
Do you think that, the concussion issues with Savage, Johnson has been, he's just a career journeyman, are they going to be really comfortable with that? Or are they going to be looking, I think you mentioned possibly, Jarrett Stidham and Brian, he seems to have that roster spot to, Brian Hoyer. Even Brian Hoyer, is he going to be the savior? But someone who can run, he has a history also running of being a starter. Who would you like?
Got a history with Matt Patricia too, obviously. I think I said it's one to keep an eye on, but I think it's probably going to be Savage. I mean, again, both Savage and Johnson have, they have a history with the quarterbacks coach. And look, Josh Johnson was a free agent when the Lions signed Tom Savage, and granted he was coming off ankle surgery, so maybe he wasn't quite ready then. But Savage has been in this system since April, so I think there's something to be said about that too. If Matthew Stafford goes down, you need a backup to hold the fort down for a minute. Again, I don't think anyone's thinking Savage is going to, lead you to wins in November and December and guide you to the playoffs. But, maybe he's a guy that you could play for 2 quarters and or a game or whatever it is, and just at least feel like he knows the offense and you can operate sort of like you did offensively last year, where you're not putting a lot on the quarterback's shoulders and you're trying to win other ways. So Hoyer, keep an eye on it. But again, I think ultimately the week 1 backup is probably one of these 2 guys on the roster still.
And not to harp the quarterback thing too much, but this is a little bit of a different situation this year. It's the whole Stafford saga of the week off and not playing versus playing and all this other stuff. It feels a little bit different. I like they kind of treated him with kid gloves a little bit this summer as opposed to other years. So maybe they know something we don't know. Who knows?
Well, but Mike Lombardi, former NFL front office executive, worked for the Patriots. He said on his podcast last week that he was told that Stafford is still dealing with something in the back too. So it's certainly something to monitor and something to watch as the season goes on. The Lions have a bye week early on, so then they're going to have 11 straight games, 11 or 12 straight games. I forget exactly what week that bye is, but essentially there's going to be a lot of football crammed into a short period of time. So something definitely to monitor. You asked if this was the backup situation. It is one of the worst in the NFL, but ultimately like they're backups for a reason, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yes, you can spend a little bit more money, and maybe you feel a little more comfortable about Teddy Bridgewater or, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Right.
But it's just levels at that.
Yeah.
To me when it comes to the backup quarterback. So I think there's, especially if you're a championship contender, you want to be confident in that backup. If something happens to your starter, a guy like Bridgewater makes sense. I don't know that the Lions were there yet, and that's why I think even though they kicked the tires on some quarterbacks, Case Keenum and some others just asking around this offseason, I think that's why ultimately they went with Savage. So, but that's one of the big position battles. I think there's a couple others that we have to monitor too. Wide receiver, we've talked about a lot. Offensive line, defensive line, the secondary. Let's just cover a couple of these real quick. The wide receiver spot, do you have, as I look at it, I think everyone agrees. Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola, they're going to get the bulk of the reps as long as they stay healthy.
Right.
I see Chris Lacy as a number 4. I think they probably keep Travis Fulgham as the number 5 just because he's a draft pick. You could make the case for Brandon Powell. You could make the case for Tommy Lee Lewis. Do you think either of those guys, or is there anyone else, Andy Jones, that has an opportunity or that you think will earn a roster spot?
No, I think you got it. I think Fulgham and Lacy have looked the best. I like Brandon Powell. I think he's done a pretty good job in camp at least. Games he hasn't stood out. He hasn't gotten that much playing time. I think he came in late, which was maybe not the best sign for him in Game 3. But I think those.
I'm right again.
How much are they going
to? You're saying I'm right again?
Yet again, for the first time, Dave. You are right. I give you credit.
As always.
Kudos to you.
Kudos to me. Thanks, Max Scherzer. All right, offensive line. Now, this is what I did in my roster prediction for the offensive line. All right, I think it's a little unusual. Typically, you have 2 backup tackles, 2 backup interior linemen. I only gave the Lions 1 backup offensive tackle, Tyrell Crosby.
Sweet.
I think he's the only tackle worthy of making this roster as a backup. Andrew Donnell could be in the mix there. But, ultimately, I mean, Kenny Wiggins, he's sort of your 4th tackle if you need it. I mean, he played some right tackle, obviously, the last couple weeks. Yeah. And Wiggins is going to be on this team, maybe even the starter. So I think if you need it, you have that option. And I would rather, see the Lions keep a young guy like, I'm going to butcher his last name, but Bo, let's just call him Bo B from Wisconsin, the undrafted rookie.
Ben Shaw?
Yeah, Ben Shaw.
It's not that hard, Ben Shaw.
It's just
look at we get a pronunciation guide in the flip card every
week. There's too many consonants. It messes with my mind. But yeah, I think he's a guy that quietly maybe has earned a spot. I mean, I think you've seen a little bit of improvement out of there. I don't know. Do you have any worries about the bigger question? I guess is, do you have any worries about Terrell Crosby as the backup? As the swing tackle, because Crosby did not play well in the only game that he played. He suffered the concussion.
Yeah.
I would like to chalk his performance up to the concussion. Don't know if he suffered at that game during the week, whenever.
Right.
So I'm not really worried about that, and that's why I feel okay keeping an extra interior lineman and 1 less tackle.
Yeah, and Wiggins, like you said, he could fill in a pinch. He's had a lot of experience. I'm not crazy about the backup situation with the line. I mean, the Ragnow thing, who knows how long it goes on, how much he misses. And I think they're just with the starters, Ragnow included, they're an average offensive line probably in the NFL. They're not going to be mowing people down or whatever. And then if you get some injuries, Dahl and Wiggins are just average backups in the NFL. It's going to test them. It's going to test that offense. So I think you're right. I was kidding with Dave the other day when he was mentioning the guys out of practice and in practices. But Terrell Crosby, Tom Savage, and Tease Tabor came back. I'm like, that only made people feel worse, probably.
Yeah, the backups came back, and the starters left. A bunch of starters weren't practicing. Rashawn Melvin, Jesse James.
And there's always someone out there. I would think maybe they're going to find somebody in free agency after the first round of cuts. They may have an eye on somebody. So I think they need an upgrade or have some other plan. I'm not sure. I don't know. Terrell Crosby is not.
Well, I would keep an eye on the offensive line and the wide receiver spots. I think those are 2 areas that they could upgrade. Come cuts. Maybe even there's a trade to be made if there's somebody that they like at one of those positions. Mm-hmm. I think defensively, look,
Tease Tabor. About Tease Tabor.
That's what I was going to get to. The secondary is the one that I found the hardest to make my decision at when I was doing my roster prediction. I gave him 12 defensive backs and I put Tabor on. I thought, maybe he was an easy stash candidate if they wanted to, but he came back to practice Monday, which means the Lions are going to have to make a decision on what to do with Tease Tabor. To me, Tease Tabor, D. Virgin, C.J. Moore, undrafted rookie safety, who's a pretty good special teams player. Maybe even throw Charles Washington in that mix. I think there's 2 spots probably to be had just based on special teams play. I gave Tabor and Washington the nod there. I think Moore is, maybe you can get him on practice squad, cheaper version, younger version of Washington, so maybe he takes over eventually. He's a guy you want to keep around. Virgin and Tabor, that's really the one that I struggled with because D. Virgin has been this team's number 1 gunner for most of camp. He's a guy, Matt Patricia's talked about it a couple times, that they really saw a lot in Game 4 from him in the preseason last year. He was with the Texans. He had 8 tackles in that game, an interception, broke up a couple passes. And, look, I mean, maybe he's even a better cornerback than Tabor, but Tabor is a second-round pick, and he's got a little bit of size, and that's just something I couldn't get out of my head. He plays some special teams, too. He's on the kick return team, but to me that is probably the biggest decision, or that'll be the most watched decision, at least, this coming weekend.
You mentioned it when you were talking about him, when you got in the locker room last week. You wrote a story, and you said that...
It's a wonderful story.
It was beautiful. And
poetry.
You said that he needs to play, and it's true.
Right.
He's in his 3rd year. He needs to play. He hasn't wowed me in camp. He's had very up and down. He had some bad practices, some okay practices, and he's missed almost all the preseason. I would, if it were me, if I were Bob Quinn, I'd put him on practice squad. I'd tell him, listen, if they try to sign you, if someone tries to claim you off, waivers, we'll sign you then to the regular roster. But I'd try to put him on practice squad, probably.
Yeah.
I'm just not convinced with him. I think they don't want to give up on him because you said, the size, 2nd round pick, all that. He has some ability. But him taking up a roster spot is,
He seemed to get it a little bit more this summer, before he got hurt, but he wasn't out there a lot, so we don't really know. I mean, he was taking number 1 reps before Slay was back, but again, I don't, it really
needed to play in those preseason games.
Yeah,
and
you wanted to see some development of him in games, and we didn't get a chance to see that. I'll tell you, ultimately, like I said, I think Virgin is a guy. I don't know. Maybe the 2nd round pick. Maybe that's clouding my judgment a little too much on this. And I think it's tough for an organization to swallow that too. To say, all right, this is a 2nd round pick from a couple years ago that we're just giving up on when you cut him.
That's where I think that the conversation is. Listen, if you don't want to accept practice squad, and you go out there, you're out in the wilderness, unless your agent knows for sure that some team loves Tease Tabor, which I don't know why they would. But, you tell them, listen, you're going to be practice squad. If someone tries to pick you, we'll take you off clock. We'll sign to the regular roster, but we believe in you. We're going to try to develop you. You still have a chance here. You have a history. There's an investment here. I think that means a lot to a player like T. Saber, who hasn't played well. I mean, he needs the benefit of the doubt, and he's going to get it more from the Lions, even on practice squad, than he is elsewhere.
The flip side would be, well, all right, if you don't think enough of me to carry me on the 53, maybe I need a fresh start elsewhere.
Where he has no history and there's no investment in him.
Yeah, no,
of course, he goes to the Patriots, he's going to be an all-pro this year. So
it's a tricky situation. Ultimately, like I said, I gave him the nod over D. Virgin because as I sort of mapped out the roster and the game day roster and looking back at my black book that you like to make fun of that I take all my training camp notes in, Chuck Washington is one of this team's gunners, and D. Virgin has been the other gunner a lot of times, but Andrew Adams can play there. Certainly we've seen Tabor. I think there's other options that you can use there, and I think Chuck is a very good gunner. And so I just thought that D has played well there. He is an option. But that's really one of the roster spots, the roster spot that I struggled the most with, that I went back and forth on, is what to do with Tease Tabor. Keep him on the 53, put him on practice squad. Do I keep D. Virgin? Can you make room for a 13th guy? I thought Steve Longa, you needed to keep his, some special teams value there because of the injury to Jared Davis. Jelani Tavai maybe not having as many special team snaps. So I think these are a lot of the things that the Lions will be discussing when it comes time to set their roster on Saturday. All right, last thing before we get out of here. Anybody in particular you want to see? Anything in particular you're looking for in Thursday's game against the Browns?
A couple of guys I've been interested in. I thought that, Mitch Lavin, defensive end, he's had a pretty good preseason.
I put him in.
Yeah, he's a guy that you could see in the mix. Hasn't made a ton of amazing, sacks, whatever, but he's played pretty well. He has gotten to the quarterback. He's stopped the run. He's gotten off blocks. I think he's looked pretty good. I definitely keep him around. I think Isaac Nada. I was disappointed. I thought he'd have a better preseason. He's supposedly had the best hands in the draft among tight ends, according to Chris White. So, and he's had a lot of drops. He's been okay in pass protection. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Do you think he's going to make it for practice squad?
I told you I wasn't going to spoil my entire thing.
Oh,
but
okay.
I will.
Okay, come back to Creep.com.
No, look, I think the number is 22, if I remember right, of 25 draft picks have made the roster under Bob Quinn. And that includes long-snapping extraordinary Jimmy Landis, who was put on injury reserve. But I think they've only cut 3 draft picks in their first season. Jake Rudock, Brad Kaya, and Pat O'Connor, if I remember right. So when you're a draft pick, there is, there's some added value. It's tougher for these teams to get rid of them. But I think that would be my one thing to watch, and that'll be in my 5 things to watch on Thursday, is some of those late-round rookies. Isaac Nada, P.J. Johnson. I think those guys are certainly on the roster bubble, and they haven't played a lot. They need to play well, I think, Thursday in order to win roster spots.
One last thing. What are you looking forward to in the game? Anything from the Cleveland Browns side? Anything that you expect to see? Any fun matchups? Any whatever?
For it to be over. That's it. For it to be over. Let's get on to the regular season.
What about the Scottish Hammer? Come on.
No.
Keep an eye on the punter, on their backup punter. Jamie Gillum, 74-yard punt, 60-yard field goal. You can resurrect your Kickalicious stories. You can link to them. Come on.
Maybe I'll tweet that out, Dave. I'm waiting for it to be over. That's all I want. Preseason to be over. Get on with the regular season. Bring on the Arizona Cardinals. That'll do it for us. Carlos Monarrez. I'm Dave Birkett. Freak.com.